Hello. Well, it looks like we have another mass school shooting. And we have the broken record from the leftist media about gun control and other hackneyed opinions about video games or taking God out of our schools, or even opinions about antidepressant medications and additional nonsense like all of the above. But as usual, if I'm going to make a video, it's going to be from my unique point of view. And it isn't influenced by popular opinion of any kind. It's influenced by reason in my own relationship with the facts of reality. The leftist propagandists point to gun control and getting rid of the Second Amendment as a solution. But if you eliminate one tiny portion of our population from the statistics, I'm talking about the black-on-black shootings from the sons of inner-city welfare queens, our gun violence statistics are better, much better, than the countries that the leftists hold up as models for eliminating violence through gun control. This fact proves that the ubiquity of guns in the United States isn't the factor that needs adjustment in this equation. The factor that no one talks about is why these shooters feel alienated and hateful. What is the source of their hate? The leftist media act as though they have great concern for the unnecessary deaths of innocent people in our country at the hands of these shooters. But if you want to talk about innocent people and the tragedy of premature and senseless death at the hands of evil, why focus on the deaths of people who die from school shooters when those same people were much more likely to die from random lightning strikes in the United States? Why don't these leftist propagandists well up with tears and talk about those more than 100 million people who died at the hands of leftists in the 20th century? Why don't they talk about the millions of innocents who starved to death in the Ukraine because leftists resented and hated and murdered the successful producers of food, just the way our leftists in America today hate and resent our successful citizens? Why don't they shed tears about the millions who died in the gulags, or the tens of millions who died in Mao's China? Why don't they talk about the millions who died because of the socialists in Cambodia? Why isn't Jimmy Kimmel crying his eyes out about the socialist misery in Venezuela right now, where those poor innocent people may as well be dead for all that living is worth in that socialist shithole thanks to socialists just like Kimmel? Why don't you ever hear these leftists crying about all of those people? Is it the children? Well, there were obviously tens of millions of children among those deaths. We know why. Because these people are evil, and they are the source of everything that is evil, including these school shooters. It's obvious to any thinking adult that public funding of education is not only unconstitutional, but it's evil. Forcing children into programs and forcing their parents and people who don't even have children to pay for it at gunpoint is never considered as a possible source of animosity by these leftists. The socialist media and politicians will never consider that fact because they're too busy trying to figure out how they can get more control over you and me. I don't need to wonder about the source of hate that fuels these shooters, because I hate every leftist that still exists in this country. I know where my hatred comes from, and I know to whom it is rightfully directed. But that's what separates intelligent adults from children and young people. Young people often just feel the alienation and hatred, but they don't know who to blame. There's a great lyric from a great album called The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis from the early 70s, which says, "Like everyone else, they're pointing, but nowhere feels quite right." I know that feeling from when I was a child and a young man. Every decent person feels victimized in America because you have been victimized. But it's difficult to know where to place the blame unless you can solve that puzzle, because you've been brought up from childhood in forced subjugation to your leftist handlers. You've been conditioned to see the world the way the leftist wants you to see it. You come to know the world and life in general within a leftist education program. And if you're not comfortable with it, and who really is, let's face it, you're ostracized and disciplined and bullied, just like your parents who are bullied when free market options are taken away from them by force. You spend your entire childhood alienated from the life you would have lived if you had only been free, and you blame everyone but those who deserve it. Figuring out where the blame belongs is not an easy puzzle to solve when you've developed within it. But I did solve this puzzle, and there is a place to point the finger that feels exactly right. Let's point the finger at all of those leftist propaganda outlets like CNN and MSNBC 13 and the Young Turks and all of those other outlets pushing the fake Russia collusion narrative and pushing force-funded programs on us like public education and government health care and drug prohibition and all of these ideas that have already killed hundreds of millions of real, innocent, actual people. Just as real as those victims of school shootings in America that these leftists pretend to care about. If you want to call these school shooters evil, I think it's more accurate to say that they are possessed by evil, or that they're the victims of evil as much as their victims are. And the sources of that evil are those sickening, pathetic, leftist propagandists who relentlessly force their poisonous, murderous, failed ideology on us. Whenever I think of the innocent dead in these school shootings, I add them to the pile of innocent dead at the hands of leftists throughout history. And I think one thing. I think about how much I wish it had been those leftist propagandists and politicians instead. I think about how much I wish it had been those who deserve it and are unfortunately still here to continue to infect our culture, instead of those who are no longer with us. Thank you for watching.